afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for the intro. So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background on PETCO, because I'm sure you see it at the bottom there. It's not about embalming your animals and recycling pets. It's actually we're the industry body for recycling PET plastic. So it's the kind of plastic with the number 1 on it. Highly recycled polymer, and through the course of the presentation you'll see what we do with it. But basically in South Africa we fulfill the industry's extended producer responsibility. So all the guys that make the bottles, they pay us a voluntary levy on every ton of resin that they buy. That comes to PETCO, and we reinvest it in the value chain, so we keep the wheels of recycling running. When we're talking recycling, we're not talking upcycling and crafty related things, although there is a place for that as well, especially for packs that are not recyclable. But it's more the mechanical recycling and turning it into a new consumer product. So we invest about 40 million a year to the big recyclers to ensure that their operations are always feasible, that they can weather the global economic sort of circumstances in the markets. And with them being able to operate all the time, it ensures that every bottle collected will actually be bought by them and turned into a new product. So we push the funding that way, and in turn it creates income for all the 44,000 street collectors that pick PET for a living. So every day go around, you see the guy with the trolley, have a look what's in the trolley, and you'll see what's locally recycled, in the area, whether it be tins, whether it's paper, plastics. So we're involved in that whole value chain. We do training, we do design for recycling, which will be the focus today. We support cooperatives, we help collectors with equipment to grow their operations, and then obviously on the extended producer responsibility side, we work with the retailers around design for recycling, around separation at source, take-back schemes, all that kind of thing. But today, my presentation is titled Packaging Love to Hate It, because I know we have people in the audience that sit on both sides of the fence, where they love it and it's innovative and it's an enabler of our modern lifestyle, but then we sit on the other side with the problem of irresponsible disposal of the packaging, litter issues, etc., etc. So I'm going to kick off. Things I'm going to cover really are the role of packaging, the South African market, because it's always interesting just to get a snapshot of where we're at and how much we're actually producing. What drives packaging development and growth in those markets, and then design for recycling as well as sustainability issues when it comes to packaging. And then I thought just a little fun element, because there are a lot of designers in the room, is to look at packaging trends and where we're heading. So really, as I've said before, plastics play an essential role, and in particular plastic packaging around in the production cycle. It prevents damage between the manufacturer and the consumer. Preservation function, which we often don't think about, is containing, preserving, preventing contamination, protecting what's in there. Tamper resistance, which is a big thing for retailers, knowing if their product has been fiddled with, especially when it comes to electronics and foods. The distribution cycle, looking at protecting the contents, preventing theft and pilferage. Then there's a whole other side of things away from the technical and functional side, which is the marketing side. The communication device, the fact that it needs to communicate vital information, ingredients, nutritional value, all that labeling forms part of that overall pack. And then of course convenience. It enables the modern lifestyles we have today. Looking at the plastic bottle, for instance, you can close it up, take it with you, take it on the road. If you're concerned about water quality, if you choose to drink bottled water or whatever it is, it becomes a real lifestyle enabling item, and it's very convenient and it doesn't break. One of the other things that I wanted to just mention is that in terms of food preservation, with the global population growing, we're finding that food security is becoming a very, very real issue. It used to be water security and energy, and it's now moving into that realm of food, where 30 to 50% of food is wasted before it actually reaches the consumer. And it's quite a scary statistic, considering that some countries are ravaged by famine and access to resources and as I say, food. So having these ideas, and I'll cover it later, of shops without product without packaging, you've got to remember that there's a whole value chain before that, and a whole cycle of sometimes even days before that product is reaching that store, and that's where packaging performs its most vital function. So just in terms of South Africa, our packaging industry is worth about 40 billion a year. And that's a 2013 stat. I couldn't get the 2014 stat. But it's growing around about 4% a year. And we've consumed, the average consumer, well, collectively, we consumed 3.7 million tons of all kinds of packaging last year. It's estimated that it's about 6 to 10% of the household waste stream. And often you think of, when you think of a landfill site and you think of waste and things like that, immediately packaging comes to mind. But it's actually quite a small percent, with builder's rubble being quite high in terms of percentage, and then organics. So things that could actually be composted that shouldn't have landed up there in the first place. So in 2013, approximately 51% of all packaging was recycled. And then just with more of a focus on plastic packaging, we produced about 1.4 million tons of virgin plastic in South Africa last year, and half of that was used in packaging. When it comes to bottles, only 26% of that was used in packaging. And close on 70% of that was used in the beverage sector. So when our industry focuses on bottles for that reason, because it's the biggest percentage when it comes to PET consumption. Overall plastics last year, they diverted about 22.5% from landfill. And we're pleased to say that in the PET sector, every 1 in 2 bottles consumed were actually recycled in South Africa. And that's actually a world-leading statistic, which is something we can pat our backs on, that we do have responsible consumers and a very active section of waste pickers in our country. So just drawing back to government and the National Development Plan, here are some of the statistics in terms of where we're looking for 2030. We've got increased earning potential, increased life expectancy, increased population, a growing economy, annual GDP, which is growing hopefully by a much higher percentage in future. So what does this really mean for the packaging market? So we're going to have a lot more consumer spending. We're going to have larger markets, more things to be packaged. And it's really an opportunity for the packaging sector to grow their annual production. At the moment, we as South Africans are consuming about 71 kilograms, and to grow that to who knows what. Linked to that increased consumption and production, of course, is increased feedstock for recycling. And as an industry, we need to make sure that our industry, that is actually realized, that we get access to the stuff before it lands up at landfill, that we educate consumers around recycling, because we really want our hands on that feedstock, because there's a lot of it. So what is going to drive this packaging development? And please stop me if you want to, or just stick a hand up and then I'll remember and come back to you later for questions. But there are a whole lot of things. We've got changing demographics. We've got a shifting middle class with a lot more people entering that middle class and ultimately becoming consumers. We're wanting convenience. People are wanting ease of handling. They want to know that products are different and things pop off the shelves, and that might drive your packaging development and how you handle that. A lot of counterfeiting on the go. So brand owners are wanting to differentiate their products and ensure that you know that this is the actual product and it's not some rip-off. And then of course the environmental and sustainability issues. And that's what I'm going to focus on probably for the rest of my talk, because each of these alone are hours and hours of presentation. So I thought maybe what could be useful is if I took you through the process of designing a new PET bottle. So brand owner comes, says, I've got this lovely new juice or whatever it is, we want to stick it into a pack, design it for us. But here it's functionality, differentiation. Does it make it look different from the competitor? Does the product pop off the shelf? Branding, new, is it familiar, is it informative? There's so many design decisions being taken. And then of course the size, the volume, the serving size, all of these things get factored in. But that's around the concept. Then the practical design is driven heavily again by the functionality, also by the production equipment that makes the bottle, and then the product that it's got to be packed into it. So you're looking like, are there new molds? Are there existing molds? Are we changing the shape of the pack? What's the cost of that going to be? What's the fridge space? How are we going to pack it in? How are they going to fit together? So there's so many informants to that. And then the final design is really a compromise of the two. So it's the most functional bottle that's economically feasible and meets the customer's expectations. But unfortunately, sustainability is often overlooked. And that's where, as an organisation, the packaging industry, I've got Mark here from on the paper side, we really are trying to educate brand owners and decision makers and marketing professionals and designers around those environmental considerations that go into development of their pack. And why? Because there's societal pressures. Consumers are demanding pure, honest, and environmentally responsible products. And we're becoming way more aware. They want to know that if I buy this thing, this pack is going to be recycled. Then I'm not adding to the waste stream with something that ultimately is not going to land up in the recycling stream. There's more legislation that's coming into play. Then there's this balance of meeting all these needs and then meeting the environmental expectations and minimizing environmental impact. We've all heard of the triple bottom line principles, and this is around energy consumption and resources and carbon footprint and all this stuff. But there's another one that often gets forgotten in the design process, and that's really facilitating maximum recovery once it's completed its job. So that's what's informing this. So it's really about meeting these divergent expectations. And I've got the pictures there. You've got your consumer, you've got your brand owner, what's a funky bottle that stands out, and then you've got your recycler who would love a lovely, pure, clean PET bottle that he could easily recycle. So what do we really advocate? We look at a holistic approach. We look at minimizing the recycling costs, because everything that makes a pack complex makes it difficult to recycle. So if there's a shrink wrap label on it, that is a contaminant in the recycling process. If there's a PVC liner underneath the lid, that's a contaminant. And what basically happens is, this is the virgin resin that they make the bottles out of, and that's a preform, by the way. So your bottle actually starts off like that, and then they injection blow mold it into a big bottle. But if it's got PVC in it or something like that, it comes out grey, and then the manufacturers don't want to buy it. The only thing it's good for then is fibre, and unfortunately then the fibre manufacturers want nice white fibre. They don't want fibre with flecks in it. So it's very limiting in terms of where that product can go. So really, to get back to this, so we like to ensure that societal expectations and company practices are matched. So we start doing talks like this, and we promote our design for recycling guidelines, which I'll show you now. Just so that you know as well, the packaging industry's got a vision of Plastics SA, has a vision of zero plastic waste to landfill by 2030. And they're planning to achieve that through not only recycling, but energy recovery and all sorts of other mechanisms as well. So we've got these guidelines called Recyclability by Design, and they're aimed at brand owners, retailers, designers, to really understand all these dynamics of what affects recycling, the environmental implications of design decisions, how to make your pack more recyclable, and preventing your pack from actually interfering with existing plastic recycling streams. And when I say that, for instance, I don't know if you guys remember the biodegradable bread bag that Albany had on the market. It was a fantastic bag. It supposedly would biodegrade, but the problem was when it landed up with other bread bags that got sold to recyclers, it became a contaminant, and they couldn't use it in the process because it broke down the polymer of the recyclate. So they said, we don't accept any bread bags anymore. So by Albany wanting to actually do something responsible that they thought was responsible, it interfered with the existing recycling technology that was here, and it wasn't really a win. So they pulled the bag. Now recyclers will accept bags again because they know they're all made of low density polyethylene or whatever it is. So, there are these design decisions that often don't always pan out for the best. So I thought I'd show you some of the stuff that industry is doing, and it may be interesting from a technical perspective or design perspective, but people are lightweighting. So they're doing more with less. Your average Coke bottle used to be 90 grams, it's down to 50 grams, and some of them are even 33 grams at the moment. So they're using a hell of a lot less packaging. And with that obviously comes reduction in resources because they're using less, it's lighter, it's better for transport because it actually reduces the fuel consumption of the trucks because the load is lighter. So they're all downstream impacts just from lightweighting that bottle. Addressing necessity. Do we really need it? And I gave the example earlier of these pop-up stores and stores now that actually are having dispensing containers, and you can bring your own container in. Fantastic. But they do work only when your source of your product is close to the actual point where you're going to be distributing it, because otherwise it spoils in between. And, you know, for instance, cucumbers, a fresh cucumber lasts about 2 to 3 days. Unfortunately or fortunately, whichever side of the fence you stand, wrapped in plastic, it lasts you 12 to 14 days. So it really is looking at, you know, how close you are to the market, etc., etc. One of the other things coming through is life cycle and closed loop systems. It's a whole concept is moving beyond cradle to grave. I think if some of the designers in the audience and the more technical people, things are always designed for redundancy. It's like, works, get rid of it, throw it away. Now we're trying to close that loop, because that thing, once consumed or used, now becomes a vital technical nutrient for a new process. And we're actually closing the loop. And we try and educate designers around this to look at the life cycle of that product. Look at the impact of, you know, its weight, etc., etc. Look at how it's going to be disposed of and how it's going to find its way back to the recycler to be made into something else. So that's becoming quite a key design trend. Then obviously designing to be recycled, which I've pretty much covered. But I thought I'd just show you this picture quickly. That is how a recycler receives his product. So you consume your beverage. If you're a responsible consumer, you recycle it, you throw it in the recycling bin, then somebody collects it, it goes to a buyback center, they get bought, and they get baled into big bales like that. When it then gets to the recycler, he then debales it and chops it up, and it goes into a big flotation tank. And the plastic, the PET, sinks to the bottom because of its density. All the other plastic types, the labels, the tin, the lids and everything, lands up on top. Then that is scraped off and it's made into polywood. So those benches and drain covers and things like that. They call it the jazz run because it's stuff they don't really want in the process. Then the stuff that sank to the bottom is then dried out and it looks like little flakes. It's then heated and extruded into spaghetti strands, which are pretty cool. We did a design project last year and we had some students using those. It was headdresses and all sorts of things. Then the little pellets come out the other end. That strand gets chopped up into little pellets that look like little diamonds, and that's ultimately what gets sold off either to a fiber manufacturer or a packaging manufacturer. So 70% of our market at the moment is fiber for PET. So it's the roof insulation, the stuffing in your pillows and duvets, the black fiber where they make wigs out of it, they make fabric out of it. So your recycle bags at Woolies are made from bottles. Anything basically that you could, or polyester is PET. So anything that can be made from polyester can be made from a recycled bottle. So in this instance, t-shirting, and then geotextiles as well for non-chemical applications. So the Gautrain was lined with recycled plastic bottles, the tunnel of the Gautrain. So it's quite interesting because often you think recycle, but it's like I recycle, I throw it in the bin. You know, the recycling bin, but you don't know what happens next. Then the other side of the fence is it's sold off to packaging manufacturers who make new packaging. So you've got new packaging, you've got your juice bottles. Woolworths already does 35% in their juice bottles, 50%. A lot of their sandwich packaging is recycled PET. So yeah, so design so that it can be recycled. I've spoken about the end markets now. And then including recycled content. That is a big driver of recycling in South Africa. It's you know, they'll only make it if there's a demand for the stuff. So recycled PET, they will only continue recycling if the retailers and the branders are using it. And we export at the moment, and these are some of the local products done with PET, the Sunlight bottle, and they're going up to 75% recycled content now. Woolies juice. And then I thought to show you the bag, the Checkers bag is made from post-consumer recycled content. So that's stuff that was thrown away after it had been used, as opposed to while it was being made. The Woolies bag in the past was made with pre-consumer stuff, so that's all the offcuts in the production process. So it wasn't a truly recycled bag. So that's just that example. And then I will make this available. These are the links for those guides. And then just to advise, the South African Plastics Recycling Organisation has a Best Recycled Product Award, which they're doing this year. And then the European Plastic Recyclers Organisation also have that. And that's really to just drive innovation in plastics and packaging, using recyclate, designing for recycled, and that sort of thing. So really around the challenges, you know, in sustainable packaging there are hurdles because it's expensive, it's complicated, it's limiting. We've gone through all the things that people need to be mindful of, and they're trade-offs. Often people ask us, oh, it's a good thing that the wine manufacturers are putting wine into PET bottles. And then somebody says, but they're not recyclable. We say, that's fine, but they've made that decision based on other informants, the carbon footprint of transporting the wine, the fact that it doesn't get broken that easily, the fact that it's lightweight. So there are all these trade-offs. So recyclability isn't always the only driver of why, you know, people choose to pack in PET or whatever packaging. So one of the things I wanted to say is it's really about meeting the needs of society. It's about functionality, and then it's also about the role that packaging plays in sustainability, not necessarily sustainable packaging. And I think one of the biggest drivers and the biggest challenges is really to continue to innovate. So what I thought is to just show you some of the local examples of where people are innovating in this space, and then some of the design trends, and then we can have some discussion about whatever struck you during the presentation. So Woolworths, they've made quite a bold move, and it's really industry leading move around their labeling. So consumers are saying, I've bought this product now, I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what to do with packaging. So they're now saying, okay, the sleeve is made from cardboard, this is widely recycled. So you know that if you throw it in your recycling bin, it is going to be recovered for recycling. The plastic, this particular film is not currently recycled, and they've developed a whole matrix where they keep in touch with industry and the recyclers to find out what is actually being taken. And then plastic tray, widely recycled. There I actually have an issue with the fact that it said the tray is recycled. If it's pure PET, it is. But if it has a little barrier layer on it, or if it got a nylon lining, it's not. And the consumer doesn't know that yet. So what we encourage is throw it in anyway, and at the recovery centre they will separate out because they know which ones are the pure PET, which ones aren't, etc. And then they speak about how the paper was sourced and the recycled content. And this is going a long way to inform consumers and help them with product choice. So you're not only choosing based on what's in there, you're choosing based on the pack as well. Their bags, for instance, are made from recycled bottles. A lot of their products have got recycled content in it. And they're also looking at really packaging where it's essential. You'll notice that some of the sleeves have gotten smaller, and there's only just the vital information on the sleeves of those packs. Whereas before it would be a big cardboard full sleeve on a tray, and you're going to throw it away anyway. So that's the kind of thing that the retailer's doing, and you'll see Pick n Pay and Checkers and all of them are following suit. Some of the more international trends, and these aren't only around sustainability issues, is in terms of packaging design. We're seeing that a lot of sort of authentic handwritten stuff is coming out, where it's consumers are really identifying with it as being a pure and honest and, you know, kind of product, and we're seeing a comeback on that sort of thing. And vintage inspiration, hand rendering, that kind of sort of thing is coming in as well. Then the luxury of less, which is a win for the sustainability sphere. It's understated design, really simple stuff, tactile textures, and once again, very simple graphic elements. So less is more, and really, I would say, popping in the fact that it's just so simple. Even Evian is going towards less colour on their labels, and that makes the pack actually better in terms of recycling, because you're not then dealing with inks in the recyclate. Some of the other cool things, also simple stuff, where the product is actually part of the visual kind of representation. I quite like the one up there where it's a cookie, but it had, obviously the afro was part of their brand identity. Take the cookie out, the afro's gone. The spaghetti was quite funky. When you pull it out, it actually looks like, I forget the name of the building, Empire State Building? There we go. I really like the one at the bottom. I don't know if all of you can see it, but it's where the little earbuds of the headphone set are a music note when packed in the packaging. So that's pretty cool as well. I can try and move it up. And then, like I said earlier about storage and functionality, there it's the honey bottles that actually fit together. But from an aesthetic perspective, it looks like a honeycomb, which is actually pretty cool. And it maximizes the space as well. Ultra pure, this is one of the other trends coming through, where you've got your monochromatic colors, straightforward, very stark kind of designs, abstract geometric shapes. Then hyperfunctional forms, and these are pretty cool, but I think once you look on the other end, the recycling side, sometimes it does become a bit of an issue, and maybe Mark can speak about all these coated papers and things like that if they actually are recycled. But it's all about the consumer experience, and then the packaging becomes, you bring it home and it becomes a bowl, or it becomes, you know, whatever it hangs on. So that's becoming quite a trend at the moment. So it's really going beyond its initial requirement, which at the first stage was obviously preservation and looking good. Then some of the other cool things where they're hyperfunctional, where the lid of the little container becomes the spoon or the knife. Obviously those are other sort of labeling trends. The little pink glasses at the bottom, where the bottle becomes a fun item afterwards, once you've consumed the contents. Flavour differentiation through colour is quite a big thing at the moment. So where you can look at the colour and immediately identify with the flavour of what's in there. So orange being orange, pink being strawberry, or whatever it may be. You're seeing it in the vodkas as well. And then leveraging digital, which is quite an interesting one. It's going beyond having just the QR codes on the stuff now, but it's some products are going with the codes, and then you could scan it and see where, if it's currently recycled in your area and where you can drop it, or what the nutritional information is. Woolies is doing it on a few of their products. E-Label is doing it locally as well. And it's really encouraging consumer interaction. And people are building it into their social media campaigns and allowing consumers to get access to exclusive content. So you put info on there, maybe it's about procurement or sustainable, as I said, sustainable procurement, and people by buying the product and then scanning it with their phone get that access to more info. In this particular one there was to see where the, one of the sunflower, was to see where the flowers were grown and what the allergens could be based on which farm it came from. So that was quite cool. And then convenience, seeing a lot more little pouches which are easier to transport, they're lighter, single portions, that kind of thing, or salad packs where you just throw it all together. There's even smart packaging now where when you add the two things together from each compartment, they heat up. So it's like a noodles with a veg, and somehow when you click it together it starts heating up. So that led into that one. Smart packaging, where you're seeing odor absorbers being built in. You've got temperature responsive packages, flavor releases, even like little indicators that when your bananas are fruit, although it's got its own indicator built in, I mean basically it turns black, but there are little patches on the packaging that change color. So while it's green it's good, when it's yellow it's going off, when it's red it's bad. And these are all the interesting things that are starting to happen in the packaging world. As I said, self-heating containers, freshness, ripeness indicators, and then pharmaceutical reminders based on how many times you turn the lid of the bottle. There's a little counter on top. So you know how many doses are left, or you know when you need to take it again. They build in the little dates, and so it's just really clever little things. Flavor releases, which are like little pods of flavor in the lid of the bottle, and when you turn it, it gets released into the water or whatever it is. So those are things happening there. And then I thought to speak about trend 10, which is bio-based polymers and biodegradables. I'm sure you've all seen the Volpre plant bottle. Now people think because it's got that little logo on it, you can throw it next to the road and it will just degrade into the earth because it is a plant. And that's not the case at all. Basically plastic is made of chemicals, and one of the chemicals, the glycol, is derived from a plant. So instead of coming from a fossil fuel process, it comes from sugarcane or something like that. So that's why it's called a plant bottle. The glycol has been replaced by a plant-derived chemical. It's fully recyclable because once the chemical compound is made, or the polymer, it's exactly the same as other plastic. You then get other ones that are bio-based and break down. or they break down when they're in contact with air, and you may often see the picture of the bottle degrading. The problem is it degrades to a point, and then you still got the little plastic pellets in the environment, which land up in the water, which land up in the sea, which land up in your stomach from the fish that you eat. So it's not a solution. It makes it invisible to the eye, but it doesn't not degrade. Then there's the issue with the bio-based plant packaging, plant-based cornstarch stuff. That's also great, but it needs to be disposed of properly. So you may buy your pack and it's made from cornstarch or some other plant-based material. It's actually got to be composted under the right circumstances. So you need to ensure that that pack doesn't get thrown into landfill or doesn't get thrown into recycling, because it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. So there's always, there's a fine line between being informed or just buying it and thinking you're doing the right thing. And I think that leads us to my final slide, and you can't really see it, but the one guy is saying we help the environment by consuming less, and the other guy is saying we help the environment by consuming lots of environmentally safe products. So it really is, it's all about responsible consumption, looking at, can it be recycled? Why are you choosing it? It is your choice at the end of the day, but just being informed about it, reducing, only buying what you need, reusing, then recycling. That's the waste hierarchy. And then asking the questions, because ultimately the industry is going to be driven by consumers. So if you create the demand, they will build it, kind of thing. And so ask those questions, and hopefully you'll start getting the answers. And that being said, I was wondering if anybody has any questions or anything you want to discuss, or if it's ticked your boxes. Yeah.